right. Thank you, Angela. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Maine State Bar Association's Bar Talk on this morning of April 26, 2021. I'm Kelly McDonald, the president of MSBA. With me is Angela Armstrong, the executive director of MSBA, without which none of this would be happening. Really appreciate you all being here. I hope for those of you with school-age kids, you had an enjoyable spring break. Since we didn't have any grand plans, we were just here. It was actually kind of stressful because all the kids were just hanging out, wondering what to do while we kept on working. But I hope that you all got to get out there and have some fun. We did do a little paddling this weekend. We went and did Leamington Rips and got into some whitewater, so that was fun. So today we have, in addition to our normal structure, and Angela will put that slide up here in a few minutes, we have as our esteemed guest, Jerry Reid, who is the Chief Legal Counsel for Governor Mills, here to talk about what it is that he does, answer any questions that you might have about his job or about any other topic that you like to raise with him. If you do have questions, and in fact, we've actually received a few in advance of Bar Talk, which might be one of the first times we've received advanced questions for Bar Talk. Please do put your questions into the chat window. We'll keep an eye on that and either interject it as we go or ask Jerry once we get to the end of it. So without further ado, Jerry, thank you so much for being here.
Happy to be here, Kelly. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, we're delighted to have you. Take it away.
All right. I thought I'd start by just telling people a little bit about how I came into this position, because I thought they might be curious about that. I worked for about 24 years in the Attorney General's office, and during that time, Janet Mills was AG for about 8 of those years in 2 different terms. Almost all of my career there, I was in the Natural Resources Division. In the last 12 years, I was the chief of that division. And when Governor Mills was elected in 2019 or 2018, and took the oath in 2019, I was appointed to be Commissioner of the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, which was a really exciting opportunity. And I served in that job for about 2 years, and I loved every minute of it. And I intended to serve in that role for as long as the governor remained governor, which I expected to be 8 years. But things don't always play out the way you expect them to. And Derek Langhauser, who was originally the governor's outstanding chief legal counsel, and I do mean outstanding, he ended up having to leave this job unexpectedly for personal reasons. And at that time, the governor asked if I would be willing to transition into this role, which of course I was. And then the deputy commissioner at DEP, Melanie Loisum, stepped into my shoes as commissioner at DEP. And a few words about Derek, I think, are in order for those of you who don't know him. He was incredibly gracious to me and generous to me during the transition. I can't imagine taking on this job without having had Derek's assistance. Derek was chief legal counsel under Governor McKernan some years ago, and then he also served as constitutional counsel to Senator Olympia Snowe and helped Senator Snowe with the Supreme Court nomination process. So he's very experienced. He's like a walking encyclopedia of knowledge about the institution of the governor's office. He and I continue to confer on a regular basis. It's a tremendous resource for me, and I'm really grateful for all the support he's given me. Also we have in the office, or 2 lawyers in the governor's office who work as lawyers. The other one is Tim Feely. He's deputy counsel. Tim just graduated from law school last year, but he is by no means a rookie around here. Governor Mills and I know him because he worked with us in the AG's office as our legislative liaison for years. And before that, he was a legislative staffer. So he really knows how things work in Augusta how to get things done. He's a really smart guy. He's a great researcher and a really, really valuable member of our team. And one kind of comforting thing about this job, which is intimidating in almost all other respects, is that you also have available to you really all the resources of the Attorney General's office to call upon when questions come up, because the AG's office does provide legal services to the governor's office. And given my time in that office, I know it quite well and have good relationships with the people there, including the current Deputy AG, Chris Taub, who is really one of the most capable attorneys in the state of Maine. And I'm really lucky to be able to call on him for advice when I'm in need of it. And then there's also the fact that the governor, who's you might consider my client here, is also one of the most experienced and capable lawyers in the state of Maine, who's had an incredibly varied and distinguished career as a lawyer in her own right. Most of you know this, but she was a district attorney at one time. She was a homicide prosecutor in the AG's office. She was a criminal defense lawyer for years, operating out of Skowhegan. She had an extensive civil practice as well. She was a state legislator. So very few people have a resume that can compete with Janet Mills in terms of background and experience on legal issues that would kind of inform her work as governor. So she's always the smartest lawyer in any meeting that I attend. And you might think that could be challenging. Actually, it works very well. I think she knows what my strengths and weaknesses are, and I know where I can be helpful to her. But it's great to have another experienced lawyer involved in making important decisions here in the office. So, in terms of the nature of the job on a day-to-day basis, the most striking thing about this role, as opposed to the others I've had in my career, I think, is the number and variety of issues that come at you every day and the speed with which they're coming at you. And you really have very little opportunity typically to kind of master the issue before you're required to make some decision about how to handle it. And that can be quite anxiety provoking in some ways, but you have to get used to it. It comes with the territory. There's no alternative, and you just have to kind of do the best you can. When I first started, I started in this job at the beginning of September of last year. And most of my work, I'd say for the first 3 months or so, until the legislature came into session, was dominated by pandemic-related issues, drafting new or amended executive orders that implemented the governor's emergency powers under Title 37B to respond to all the issues that we're familiar with now that state governments have had to struggle with as a result of the COVID-19 challenges. So gathering limits, face covering requirements, travel restrictions, all these things, how to strike the right balance and then try to express that balance as clearly as possible in an executive order. That was inevitably something that was being prepared under intense time pressure. So there's a team of people in state government who would work on these issues together. Dr. Neerav Shah, the director of the Maine CDC, is one of them. And I think it might surprise some people here to know that Dr. Shah is not just a very distinguished doctor and a great communicator, as we've seen over the months. He's also an attorney. He got both his medical degree and his JD from the University of Chicago. So he's a brilliant professional, and it's been my good fortune to be able to work with him as we tried to navigate around some of the constitutional issues that are implicated in the executive orders that we've worked on together. Since the legislature has come back, not surprisingly, my work, my kind of day-to-day work, has been dominated by legislative activities. This is the first year of a 2-year legislative session with a new legislature. There's a huge amount of pent-up energy and enthusiasm in the legislature for doing big things. Democrats control both houses, and there are lots of big ideas out there being advanced, and the legislature is doing its work in a virtual model, which is presenting some challenges, I think. They're doing as well as can be expected, but the usual kind of interpersonal interactions that take place in a legislative committee room are not possible now, and I think that is creating some challenges for the committee members in getting access to the best available information to help inform their decision making. But there are lots of really ambitious ideas being advanced in the legislature right now. There will be about 2,000 bills voted on within this session, which is currently scheduled to end in mid-June. I think there's still about 500 bills that have been yet to be printed. So there's an enormous volume of work to be done that way. So, I've been looking at really ambitious and complicated pieces of legislation dealing with issues like juvenile justice reform, tribal jurisdictional issues, gun control, lots of different issues, many of which I don't have a lot of background in previously. So when that's the case, I have enough insight into my own limitations to know that I need to call in the experts on the subject, whatever it may be. And so I've been around long enough usually to know where those experts are and how to get in touch with them. But that's how I go about trying to get the best information available to help me make decisions on how to be an effective counselor to the governor on some of this legislation that we're dealing with. Judicial nominations has also been a big part of the job. I think we've had about a dozen judges confirmed already this session. We expect to have a few more to deal with before the legislature adjourns in June. That's a gratifying part of the job. It's somewhat time consuming, but it's fun. Tim and I also staff the pardons board for the governor. The pardons board makes recommendations to the governor on pardons and commutations. Fern La Rochelle, the longtime head of the criminal division in AG's office, is the chair, and the other members are Dee Bassano, former DA, John Kelly from Kelly Rummel and Zimmerman, and retired Justice John Atwood. So it's a good group. And then we have a bunch of other kind of miscellaneous issues we deal with: extradition warrants, certain bond expenditure approvals, deeds for title work or for real estate transactions that need to be signed by the governor, and just kind of a grab bag of other things that come through the office every day, some of which I, never would have been able to predict. So it's a very exciting and kind of dynamic work environment here, to put it mildly. But maybe I should pause there, Kelly, and see what questions you might have for me, or what else you think would be interesting for people to hear about.
Well, I've got to tell you, Jerry, this is all very interesting for me because I've never had a very clear understanding of what your office does and the distinctions between your office and the Attorney General's office. So it has been quite educational for me. I think I can say that so far you are successfully answering everybody's questions because I don't have any new ones that have been posed. Um, so fortunately, we did get a couple of questions in advance. Perhaps we should turn towards those, and I have them here in front of me. The first question has to do with the Chief Justice for the Law Court. And the question is, what criteria Governor Mills is using to make that selection, and what is the timeline for that selection?
Yeah, sure. So that's obviously a big deal, and you'd expect that a governor who's made her career as a lawyer would care very deeply about that issue, and that's absolutely the case. So she's put a lot of effort into that. The criteria I guess I would summarize as you obviously are looking for somebody who's got the intellectual capacity to do the court's decisional work. Ideally, you want somebody who's got some administrative experience, even running a small organization, because there's a real administrative component to being the head of the judicial branch. And then I think you want to find somebody who has the political experience or the skills to at least work effectively with the other two branches of government, the executive branch and legislative leadership, and hopefully the interpersonal skills to work effectively with one's colleagues within the SJC. Beyond that, I think you're looking for somebody who has empathy and humility, and ideally will contribute to the diversification of the bench. So that's a tall order. There aren't all that many people out there who check off those boxes, but those are the criteria that I think you're applying. In terms of timing, we do expect to post a nomination before the end of this session in time for the legislature to confirm that nominee before they adjourn in June.
All right, great. And then the second question has to do with there's an interesting idea that has been posed, which is it's a proposal to deal with the enormous backlog that the judicial branch is dealing with right now. And the proposal is, well, perhaps you could appoint temporary judges for perhaps 6-month terms that could hear non-felony cases, certain types of civil cases, and help clear the court's dockets and the backlogs. Suggested that there must be dozens of retired lawyers and retired judges who might be willing to serve for a short period of time. Is that something the governor might be interested in considering?
Well, that's an interesting idea. I think that under the Maine Constitution, judges are required to be appointed for terms of 7 years under Title, I think, Article 6 of the Constitution controls that. I'd have to double check, so I'm not sure that it would be viable, but it's always possible I'm missing something there. And in terms of, the situation with the court system and the backlog that exists, we've been in touch with Acting Chief Justice Mead on a fairly regular basis, and he's been great to work with. And the feedback that I've heard from him is that the primary limiting factors in kind of freeing up resources to address the backlog are more kind of are not necessarily the number of judges, but are more logistical. Surprising to me was the fact that a shortage of available marshals was one of the leading constraints that the judges have pointed to as holding them back, because the marshals are important to help implement COVID-19 protocols as things reemerge here. And then just kind of logistical issues with space in courtrooms and trying to work with remote hearings and implement what's necessary to do that effectively. Those have been identified to me as the limiting factors, but we certainly are anxious to work with the judicial branch any way we can to help them address the backlog in cases that's developed during the pandemic.
Well, it's good to hear that, and that is consistent with what we've heard from the acting chief previously when he's joined us here on Bar Talk, is that he really needs marshals, and that he has a lot of challenges in getting enough marshals to run as many courtrooms as he would like, and those challenges have to do with, I think, a big part of it is funding. I do want to just pass on to you, Jerry, that. This is a huge problem that we have, because I think historically the courts operated under a situation where they were just barely keeping up, frankly. And we're now looking at this year and a half, perhaps, backlog of cases, means that unless something is done, that year and a half backlog is going to be with us indefinitely. I'm telling clients right now that it might be 4 years before their case comes to a jury trial, because I don't deal in the kinds of cases. I do civil litigation. I don't do criminal or family or the other cases, which are appropriately given a higher priority. But that's terrible, because 4 years of litigation costs a lot more than 2 years of litigation, and it means that you're not resolving really important issues for the citizens of Maine. So I'm very happy to hear that is something that the governor is aware of. And on behalf of the association, I just want to offer you a plea that this is a really big problem. And I think that it is going to take a solution that is above and beyond just reopening the courts. Just reopening the courts alone is not going to solve that problem. There's going to need to be some additional steps taken.
Yeah, I think you're right, Kelly. And there's no dispute, I think, about anything that you said there. And it's going to take some real creative solutions to bring about the kind of relief that we're all looking for.
I have another question here for you, Jerry. It has to do with appointments to professional regulatory boards. And I think it's both a process question and a timing question. I'll interpret the process question. What role do you play in that process? Is it similar to the judicial appointments? And given all the other things that you guys are dealing with, is there a bit of a backlog on that? And is that being is that something that's on the priority list as well?
Yeah. So there's somebody here in the governor's office whose job it is to oversee that. Her name is Melissa O'Neill, and she has an assistant, Joe Bushi, who work full time on that. And their work was stymied during the worst of the pandemic. That really came to a halt, and that created its own backlog. But there's been huge progress made in the last 6 weeks or so on that. We've had, I think, about 100 nominees confirmed to various positions on boards and commissions, and we're poised to post probably a few dozen more by the end of the session. So we're catching up on that. It's surprising to me how many of these positions there are. I never realized that until I was in this job, but there's over 300 such positions in state government. And of course, the occupants of those positions are constantly cycling through their terms. So you never fully catch up, and you're never fully caught up to it. Typically, I don't have a kind of a leading role in that work, except with respect to certain boards or commissions that have a legal dimension to them, like the Board of Bar Examiners, for example. I play a more active role in that than some, but there's a huge number of these boards and commissions doing a huge variety of work, and there's hundreds of jobs to fill. So we're always looking for the best available candidates to serve in those roles.
And one of the points that is being offered is the thought that when people's terms are up, the concern that is being expressed is that people do not automatically get renewed without a review. And I think that the person that is asking this question of me has a couple of people in mind from the prior administration with which she believes are not well suited for that position. And so, but leaving aside the views on particular nominees, I think the question is there reassurance that people are not automatically renewed for a position that they may have already been seated in?
The answer to that is emphatically yes. The governor scrutinizes these openings and does not act upon them until she is satisfied that the person is a good choice. I can personally vouch for that. And if any of the listeners have particular concerns, they should feel free to get in touch with me to talk about that if they prefer to do that, or they could get in touch with Melissa O'Neill directly. And her contact information is on the governor's website.
Okay, great. That was actually going to be my next question. Well, Jerry, I really appreciate you being with us. I feel there's a lot more questions that I could ask, but I'm going to, for reasons of time on this first Monday after spring break, thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure. Thanks very much, Kelly. It was fun.
All right, and now moving on through the rest of our regularly scheduled program, a couple of updates from, why am I giving updates from the executive branch? Jerry should be giving these updates. As we mentioned 2 weeks ago, the state of civil emergency is now through May 13th, and I guess we know who's to blame for drafting that particular order. We did recently pass the milestone of half of adults have received a dose of the vaccine. That's awesome. My wife and I last Tuesday passed our 2-week point after the J&J vaccine, so we're feeling pretty good about that, and no blood clots. Angela, over to you for MSBA updates.
Just a reminder, the Summer Bar Conference proposals are due by the end of this month, which means the end of this week. Please, please, please send them in. We need your thoughts on proposals. Next week is Wellbeing Week in the Law, and there's a bunch of material out there. We're going to be posting it to our website and social media sites. Every day next week, there's a daily focus, whether it be career, spiritual, social, or emotional well-being, stuff like that. There are ABA programs to attend for free, articles that they recommend you read, activities that you can do on your own or with your staff or colleagues. So make sure you take a look at that. And finally, you can see we've got a great lineup of guests coming up in May, and we'll kick that off with MAP Director Bill Nugent to in honor of Wellbeing Week on May 3rd.
And I want to flag that the week after, Bill, we've actually got the president of the ABA joining us, which is exciting. And then Michelle Drager and Anne-Marie Story coming up after that. If you have ideas for speakers that you'd like to hear from, please pass them along to myself or Angela. Now, George Hess was kind enough to offer us some practice tips. Angela, if you'll go to that next slide. And it's wall of text. Hello. Listen, if any of you have practice tips and you'd like to appear on Bar Talk, or just send it in as George has done, we'd love to feature the ideas that you have to help make the practice of law better. So I'll summarize this. Up at the top, you've got George's background and his invitation to contact him if you'd like to talk about any of this stuff or any of these other, some of these other issues that he's listed here. A reminder, these slides are posted. Are they posted on our website? On our website, in addition to the YouTube video, which you can go back and pause so you can read this in more depth. But I want to flag the apps that he uses. Clio, which is available as a member benefit through the MSBA. It's a program I've looked at, not appropriate for my firm because because we're a larger firm, but I think it works really well. It's very clean and smooth and modern looking, unlike what we currently use. And then he lists some other apps that he uses. Notability, TrialPad, Box is something I've used. I think it's similar to Dropbox. Adobe, of course. He uses CaseMaker as opposed to LexisNexis or Westlaw. Another MSBA benefit. Thank you, members, for joining, and make sure you make use of that. And so, George, thank you very much. Really appreciate you sharing these ideas with folks. And again, I want to invite you to send in your ideas or be willing to appear on the show to share whatever you would like to pass along, whether it's a technology tip or a practice tip or a negotiation tip, what have you. I offered up the wellness tip, which is if you have kids and you garden, don't just grow beets, right? Don't just grow potatoes, which are boring. At the end of the year, you get to dig them up, and that's kind of fun. But grow stuff that throughout the year, then you go out there and just pick a handful of stuff and eat, because it really connects the gardening with the production for them. Angela, you offered up the gratitude.
I did. Last week, if you are unaware, was last Wednesday was Administrative Professionals Day. We didn't have bar talk, so we couldn't remind you on Monday, but I'm very thankful for the administrative professionals that work here at the MSBA, and I'm sure all of you are as well.
Without them, none of us would probably be in business. Folks, that concludes Bar Talk for today, April 26th. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Jerry, again, for being here as our guest speaker. You all are great. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next Monday. Take care.